Here's the most controversial thing I'll ever tell you about failure. People don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they're addicted to the story they tell themselves about why they can't succeed. They've fallen in love with their excuses, married their limitations, and had children with their complaints. These people collect reasons why they can't make it the way other people collect trophies. They're more committed to their sob story than successful people are to their success story. They've made a career out of explaining why life is unfair to them, and they're experts at it. The saddest part is they think this makes them special, when really it just makes them predictably unsuccessful. Let me tell you something that will change your life forever. Right now, as you sit there listening to me, there's a voice in your head. It never stops talking. It's been chattering away since you woke up this morning, and it'll keep going until you fall asleep tonight. This voice is more powerful than any boss you'll ever have, more influential than any teacher, more persuasive than any salesperson. So this voice is you talking to yourself. Now here's what's fascinating. Most people don't even realize this conversation is happening. They go through their entire lives listening to this internal chatter without ever stopping to ask themselves one simple question. What is this voice saying to me? And more importantly, is what it's saying helping me? You see, there are two kinds of people in this world. There are winners and there are losers. And the fundamental difference between them isn't their education, their background, their connections, or even their opportunities. The fundamental difference is the conversation they have with themselves every single day. Winners talk to themselves differently than losers do. It's that simple and it's that profound. The person who becomes successful has learned to have a different internal dialogue than the person who struggles through life. The millionaire thinks different thoughts and says different things to himself than the person who's broke. The person with great relationships talks to themselves about people and love and connection in a completely different way than the person who's lonely and isolated. I learned this lesson when I was 25 years old, and it changed everything for me. I was working at a department store, barely making ends meet, and I had convinced myself that this was just the way life was supposed to be. I had a whole story I was telling myself about why I couldn't do better, why I couldn't have more, why I wasn't capable of success. Then one day, I met a man who challenged everything I believed about myself. He didn't give me money. He didn't give me a job. He didn't give me connections. What he gave me was something far more valuable. He helped me hear what I was saying to myself. And when I finally heard it, really heard it, I was shocked. I was saying things to myself that I would never say to my worst enemy. I was criticizing myself, limiting myself, defeating myself before I even tried. I was my own worst critic, my own biggest obstacle, my own greatest enemy. And the saddest part was, I didn't even know I was doing it. This internal voice, this conversation you have with yourself, it's like a radio station that's always playing in the background of your mind. And just like you can choose what radio station to listen to in your car, you can choose what kind of thoughts and words to feed your mind. But here's the problem. Most people never make this choice consciously. They just listen to whatever happens to be playing. To think about this for a moment. How do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? What do you say when you're facing a challenge? How do you describe your capabilities, your potential, your future? The answers to these questions will tell you everything you need to know about where your life is headed. When a winner makes a mistake, they might say to themselves, "So that didn't work. What can I learn from this? How can I do better next time?" When a loser makes the same mistake, they say, "I'm so stupid, I always mess things up. I'll never get this right." Same mistake, same situation, but completely different internal conversations. And guess what? These different conversations lead to completely different outcomes. The winner learns, adjusts, and tries again. The loser gives up, makes excuses, and sells for less. It all starts with what they say to themselves in that moment when things don't go as planned. Your internal dialogue is like water, constantly dripping on a stone. One drop doesn't make much difference, but over time, that constant dripping can carve right through solid rock. Your thoughts and words to yourself are doing the same thing. They're either building you up or wearing you down, day by day, thought by thought, word by word. Most people think their circumstances create their thoughts. They think they're negative because their life is hard, or they think they're pessimistic because they've had bad experiences. But that's backwards. Your thoughts create your circumstances. Your internal dialogue shapes your external reality. Change the conversation in your head, and you'll change the results in your life. I want you to understand something. The voice in your head right now, the one that's been with you all these years, it didn't develop by accident. It's been shaped by every conversation you've ever had, every book you've ever read, every movie you've ever watched, every person you've ever spent time with. Your internal voice is a mixture of your parents' voices, your teachers' voices, your friends' voices, and the voices of everyone who's ever influenced you. But here's the beautiful thing. Just because that voice was shaped by your past doesn't mean it has to control your future. You can change it. You can reprogram it. You can teach it to speak differently. You can train it to serve you instead of sabotage you. The first step is awareness. You have to start paying attention to what you're saying to yourself. You have to become conscious of this unconscious process. Most people go through their entire lives without ever really listening to their own thoughts. They're like passengers in their own minds, just along for the ride wherever their thoughts happen to take them. But you can become the driver. You can take control. You can choose what thoughts to think and what words to say to yourself. You can decide whether your internal voice will be your biggest supporter or your worst enemy. Winners have learned this secret. They've discovered that they don't have to be victims of their own thinking. They've realized that they can choose thoughts that empower them, words that build them up, internal conversations that move them toward their goals instead of away from them. When a winner wakes up in the morning, they don't say, "Oh no, another day." They say, "What can I accomplish today? What opportunities will I create? How can I grow and contribute?" When they face a challenge, they don't say, "This is too hard for me." They say, "This is going to make me stronger. This is going to teach me something valuable." The conversation in your head is the most important conversation you'll ever have. It goes on longer than any other conversation in your life. It has more influence over your actions, your decisions, your results than any other voice you'll ever hear. So, doesn't it make sense to make sure it's a conversation that serves you? Most people are having a conversation with themselves that would discourage anyone from trying, from dreaming, from believing in possibilities. They're telling themselves all the reasons why they can't succeed, why they're not good enough, why they don't deserve better, and then they wonder why their lives don't improve. But what if you could change that conversation? What if instead of talking yourself out of your dreams, you talked yourself into them? What if instead of focusing on all the reasons why you might fail, you focused on all the reasons why you might succeed? What if instead of being your own worst critic, you became your own best coach? This is what winners do. They've learned to be encouragers to themselves. They've learned to speak words of possibility, of potential, of promise. They've learned that the quality of their internal dialogue determines the quality of their external results. Your mind is like a garden, and your thoughts are like seeds. You can plant seeds of doubt and limitation, and you'll harvest a crop of struggle and disappointment. Or you can plant seeds of possibility and potential, and you will harvest a crop of success and fulfillment. The choice is always yours. The conversation in your head never stops, so you might as well make it a conversation that builds you up instead of tears you down. You might as well make it a conversation that moves you toward your goals instead of away from them. You might as well make it a conversation that creates the life you want instead of the life you don't want. This is the foundation of all success. This is where winners are made, not in the external world of opportunities and circumstances, but in the internal world of thoughts and words and conversations with yourself. Change this, and everything else will follow. Now let me tell you about the vocabulary of defeat. Let me share with you the exact words and phrases that keep people stuck, broke, and unsuccessful. These are the words that guarantee failure before you even start. These are the internal conversations that build prison walls around your potential. The first thing losers say to themselves when they see something they want is, "I can't afford it." Just like that, case closed. No thinking required, no creativity needed, no problem solving necessary, just three simple words that end all possibility. I can't afford it. But here's what's interesting. Rich people, successful people, winners, they rarely use those words. When they see something they want, they ask themselves a completely different question. They say, how can I afford it? What would I need to do to make this possible? How could I earn this? How could I create this? You see the difference? One conversation ends all possibility. The other conversation opens up possibility. One conversation makes you a victim of circumstances. The other conversation makes you a creator of circumstances. But it gets worse than just, "I can't afford it." Losers have an entire vocabulary of limitation. They say things like, "I'm not smart enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm not connected enough. I'm not lucky enough." They've got more reasons why they can't succeed than most people have reasons why they can. Listen to what unsuccessful people say to themselves when opportunity knocks. They say, "That won't work for me." They say, "People like me don't do things like that." They say, "I could never pull that off." They say, "I don't have what it takes." They've already defeated themselves before they even try. I've watched people talk themselves out of amazing opportunities with their internal dialogue. I've seen people destroy their chances for success before they even took the first step. They meet someone who could help them, and instead of thinking, "What a great connection," they think, "They're probably too busy for someone like me." They hear about a business opportunity, and instead of thinking, maybe this could work, they think, "This is probably too good to be true." Losers are experts at finding problems. They're professionals at spotting obstacles. They can tell you everything that's wrong with an idea before you've even finished explaining it. Their internal dialogue is constantly scanning for danger, for difficulty, for reasons why something won't work. When they wake up in the morning, they don't say, "What wonderful things might happen today." They say, "What's going to go wrong today?" When they go to work, they don't think, "How can I add value and grow in my career?" They think, "How can I just get through another day without getting in trouble?" The loser's internal voice is always focused on the negative. It's always looking for what's missing instead of what's possible. It's always finding fault instead of finding opportunity. It's like having a critic living in your head who never takes a day off. And here's something that will shock you. Most people's internal dialogue is meaner to them than their worst enemy would ever be. Think about that. Your worst enemy wouldn't spend 24 hours a day telling you why you can't succeed, why you're not good enough, why you should give up on your dreams. But your own internal voice might be doing exactly that. Losers blame their internal dialogue on external circumstances. They say, "Well, of course I'm negative. Look at my situation." They say, "Of course I don't believe in myself. Look at all the times I've failed." They say, "Of course I can't see possibilities. Look at how tough things are." But that's backwards thinking. Their situation is tough because their thinking is tough. They keep failing because they keep expecting to fail. They can't see possibilities because they've trained their mind to look for problems instead of solutions. Let me give you some examples of how losers talk to themselves about money. They say, "Money doesn't grow on trees." They say, "Money is the root of all evil." They say, "Rich people are greedy." They say, "You have to be dishonest to make a lot of money." They say, "Poor people are more honest than rich people." With internal dialogue like that, is it any wonder they stay broke? They've convinced themselves that being poor is somehow more noble than being wealthy. They've talked themselves into believing that struggling with money is more honest than having plenty of money. Here's how losers talk to themselves about relationships. They say all the good ones are taken. They say people always let you down. They say you can't trust anybody these days. They say love doesn't last. They say relationships are too much work. And then they wonder why they're lonely. They wonder why their relationships don't work out. They wonder why they keep attracting the wrong people. But it's not a mystery. Their internal dialogue is creating their external reality. Losers talk to themselves about their health in the same defeating way. They say, I'm getting old. They say, I've got bad genes. They say, healthy food tastes terrible. They say, exercise is boring. They say, I don't have time to take care of myself. And their health reflects exactly what they've been saying to themselves. Their body responds to their internal conversation. Their energy level matches their internal dialogue. Their vitality reflects their internal beliefs. But here's the most dangerous thing losers say to themselves. They say, this is just the way I am. They say, I can't change. They say, I've always been this way. They say, it's too late for me. They say, people don't really change. These are the most limiting words anyone can ever say to themselves. These words don't just close the door on possibility. They weld it shut. These words don't just end the conversation. They burn down the whole building. When someone says, this is just the way I am, they're really saying, I refuse to grow. I refuse to learn. I refuse to improve. I refuse to become better than I am right now. They're choosing to stay stuck rather than do the work required to change. Losers love to talk to themselves about their past failures. They replay their mistakes over and over in their minds. They remind themselves of every time they didn't succeed, every time they were rejected, every time they fell short. They use their past as evidence for why they can't have a better future. They say things like, I tried that before and it didn't work. They say, I'm not good at that kind of thing. They say, I always mess up when it really matters. They say, good things don't happen to people like me. Their internal dialogue keeps them trapped in patterns of the past. They can't move forward because they're constantly looking backward. They can't create new results because they're constantly rehearsing old failures. And here's something else losers do with their internal dialogue. They constantly compare themselves to other people in the most defeating way possible. They say, I'll never be as smart as him. They say, I'll never be as talented as her. They say, I'll never have what they have. They say, some people are just born lucky. Instead of using other people's success as inspiration, they use it as evidence of their own limitations. Instead of thinking, if they can do it, maybe I can too, they think, they can do it, but I never will. The loser's internal dialogue is like poison. It slowly kills their dreams, their confidence, their potential. Day by day, thought by thought, word by word, they talk themselves into a smaller and smaller life. They convince themselves to settle for less, to expect less, but the saddest part of all is that most people don't even realize they're doing this to themselves. They think their negative internal dialogue is just being realistic. They think their limiting self-talk is just being honest. They think their defeatist inner voice is just being practical. They don't understand that they're choosing their thoughts. They don't realize that they're selecting their words. They don't recognize that they're creating their own internal experience. They think it's just happening to them, but really they're making it happen. This is the vocabulary of defeat. These are the words that guarantee failure. This is the internal dialogue that keeps people stuck, broke, lonely, and unsuccessful. And the worst part is, it's all self-imposed. It's all chosen. It's all voluntary. But it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to talk to yourself like a loser. You don't have to use the vocabulary of defeat. You don't have to let your internal dialogue limit your potential and destroy your dream. There's another way to talk to yourself. There's a different internal conversation you can have. There's a vocabulary of victory waiting for you to learn it and use it. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. Now let me tell you how winners talk to themselves. Let me share with you the exact words and phrases that create success, build wealth, and turn ordinary people into extraordinary achievers. This is the vocabulary of victory. This is the internal dialogue that opens doors, creates opportunities, and makes dreams come true. When winners see something they want, they don't say, I can't afford it. They say, how can I afford it? Those four little words change everything. They shift your brain from shutdown mode to solution mode. They turn you from a victim into a creator. They transform you from someone who accepts limitations into someone who finds possibilities. How can I afford it? That question forces your mind to work. It makes you think. It pushes you to be creative. It demands that you find a way instead of finding an excuse. It's the difference between ending the conversation and beginning the real conversation. Winners have learned that the quality of their life is determined by the quality of the questions they ask themselves. Poor questions create poor results. Powerful questions create powerful results. Limiting questions lead to limited lives. Expanding questions lead to expanded possibilities. When faced with a challenge, losers ask themselves, why does this always happen to me? Winners ask themselves, what can I learn from this? Losers ask, why is life so unfair? Winners ask, how can I use this situation to grow stronger? Losers ask, why me? Winners ask, why not me? You see, winners have discovered something that most people never learn. They've learned that they don't have to be victims of their circumstances. They can be architects of their circumstances. They don't have to accept whatever life hands them. They can create whatever life they want. Listen to how winners talk to themselves about their potential. They don't say, I'm not smart enough. They say, I can learn whatever I need to know. They don't say, I'm not talented enough. They say, I can develop whatever skills I need. They don't say, I'm not connected enough. They say, I can build the relationships I need. Every limitation becomes a challenge to overcome. Every weakness becomes an opportunity to grow stronger. Every obstacle becomes a chance to prove what they're really made of. When winners make a mistake, they don't say, I'm so stupid. They say, well, that was a stupid thing to do, but I'm smart enough to learn from it and not do it again. They separate the action from their identity. They don't let one mistake define their entire worth as a human being. This is crucial. Winners take responsibility for their actions, but they don't destroy their self-projection over their mistakes. They say things like, I made a poor choice, but I make better choices now. They say, I failed at that project, but I'm not a failure as a person. They say, I got rejected, but I'm not rejectable. Winners understand that what they say to themselves about their mistakes will determine whether those mistakes become stepping stones or stumbling blocks. They choose words that help them learn and grow rather than words that make them feel ashamed and defeated. Let me tell you how winners talk to themselves about money. They say, money is a tool that allows me to help more people. They say, wealth gives me options and freedom. They say, the more money I have, the more good I can do in the world. They say, I deserve to be financially successful. Winners don't apologize for wanting to be wealthy. They don't feel guilty about their financial success. They understand that money is not evil. Poor thinking about money is what's evil. Scarcity thinking about money is what creates problems. Negative internal dialogue about money is what keeps people broke. When winners see wealthy people, they don't say, they're probably greedy or dishonest. They say, if they can do it, I can do it too. They use other people's success as proof of what's possible, not as evidence of what's impossible for them. Winners talk to themselves about their goals differently too. They don't say, I hope this works out. Hope is not a strategy. Winners say, I will make this work. They don't say, maybe I can do this. Maybe is doubt disguised as possibility. Winners say, I will do this. They use definite language, they use certain language, they use committed language. Their internal dialogue reflects their commitment to their goals, not their doubt about their goals. When winners face setbacks, they don't say, this proves I can't do it. They say, this is teaching me how to do it better. They don't say, I should quit while I'm ahead. They say, I'm learning what doesn't work so I can find what does work. Winners understand that setbacks are not stop signs, they're course corrections. They're not reasons to quit, they're reasons to adjust. They're not proof that they can't succeed, they're proof that they're in the game. Here's how winners talk to themselves about other people. They don't say, I can't trust anyone. They say, I can learn to be a better judge of character. They don't say, people always let you down. They say, I attract people who share my values and standards. Winners take responsibility for the relationships in their lives. If they're surrounded by negative people, they don't blame the people. They ask themselves, what am I doing to attract these kinds of people? How can I become the kind of person who attracts better people? They understand that we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. So instead of complaining about the people in their lives, they work on becoming the kind of person who naturally attracts quality people. Winners talk to themselves about their health with the same positive expectation. They don't say, I'm getting old. They say, I'm getting wiser and more experienced. They don't say, my body is falling apart. They say, my body responds well to good nutrition and exercise. They understand that their body listens to every word they say about it. Their cells respond to their internal dialogue. Their energy level reflects their internal conversations. So they choose words that build up their physical vitality rather than tear it down. When winners face a new opportunity, they don't say, this probably won't work for me. They say, how can I make this work for me? They don't say, people like me don't do things like that. They say, I'm exactly the kind of person who does things like that. Winners give themselves permission to succeed. They give themselves permission to grow. They give themselves permission to become more than they've ever been before. Their internal dialogue is constantly expanding their sense of what's possible for their lives. Here's something powerful that winners do. They talk to themselves about the future with absolute certainty that good things are coming. They don't say, I hope things get better. They say, things are getting better every day. They don't say, maybe my dreams will come true someday. They say, my dreams are becoming real right now. Winners understand that their internal dialogue about the future is actually creating their future. What they expect tends to happen. What they believe becomes their reality. What they consistently say to themselves becomes their experience. So they choose to expect good things. They choose to believe in positive outcomes. They choose to speak words of faith and confidence and expectation over their lives. When winners wake up in the morning, they don't groan and say, oh no, another day. They say, what amazing things will happen today? What opportunities will I create? What problems will I solve? What value will I add to the world? Their internal dialogue sets the tone for their entire day. They program themselves for success before they even get out of bed. They prime their minds for possibilities before they face their challenges. Winners also talk to themselves about their past differently than losers do. They don't constantly rehash their failures and mistakes. Instead, they focus on their growth and progress. They say things like, look how far I've come. They say, I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm not where I used to be either. They use their past as fuel for their future, not as an anchor that holds them back. They extract the lessons and leave behind the pain. They take the wisdom and release the regret. Winners understand that their internal dialogue is their most powerful tool for creating the life they want. So they guard it carefully. They monitor it constantly. They adjust it regularly. They treat their internal conversations like the precious resource they are. They know that what they say to themselves today will determine what they become tomorrow. They know that their words have power. They know that their thoughts become things. They know that their internal dialogue is literally creating their external reality. This is the language of champions. This is how winners talk to themselves. This is the vocabulary that creates success, builds wealth, attracts opportunities, and turns dreams into reality. But knowing this language isn't enough. You have to learn to speak it fluently. You have to make it your native tongue. You have to reprogram your internal dialogue from the vocabulary of defeat to the vocabulary of victory. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. How to change the conversation in your head. how to replace the words that limit you with words that liberate you, how to transform your internal dialogue from your greatest enemy into your greatest ally. Now here comes the important part. How do you actually change the conversation in your head? How do you reprogram years of negative self-talk? How do you replace the vocabulary of defeat with the language of champions? It's not enough to know what winners say to themselves. You have to learn to say it yourself. The first step is awareness. You cannot change what you're not aware of. You have to start catching yourself in the act of negative self-talk. You have to become a detective of your own thoughts. You have to listen to what you're saying to yourself throughout the day. This takes practice. Most people have been running the same mental programs for so long that their negative self-talk has become automatic. It's like background music that you don't even notice anymore. But once you start paying attention, you'll be amazed at what you hear. Start right now. For the next week, I want you to carry a small notebook with you. Every time you catch yourself saying something limiting, defeating, or negative to yourself, write it down. Don't judge it. Don't try to change it yet. Just notice it and write it down. You might be shocked at what you find. You might realize you're saying, I can't, 20 times a day. You might notice you're constantly apologizing to yourself for things that aren't your fault. You might hear yourself using words like always and never in the most defeating ways possible. You always mess things up. I never get a break. This always happens to me. I never have enough money. These absolute words create absolute limitations in your mind. Once you become aware of your negative self-talk patterns, the next step is interruption. You have to learn to stop these conversations in their tracks. The moment you catch yourself saying something limiting, you need to interrupt that thought and replace it with something better. Here's a simple technique that works. When you catch yourself saying something negative, immediately say, cancel that out loud if possible, or silently if you're around other people. Then replace the negative statement with a positive one. If you catch yourself saying, I can't afford it, immediately say, cancel that, how can I afford it? If you catch yourself saying, I'm not smart enough for this, immediately say, cancel that, I can learn whatever I need to know. This might feel awkward at first. You might feel silly talking to yourself this way. But remember, you've been talking to yourself your whole life. You've just been doing it unconsciously and often negatively. Now, you're going to do it consciously and positively. The key is consistency. You have to do this every single time you catch yourself in negative self-talk. No exceptions. Every negative thought gets interrupted and replaced. Every limiting statement gets canceled and corrected. Every defeating word gets stopped and substituted. Your brain is like a computer. It's been programmed with certain responses to certain situations. When something goes wrong, your brain automatically runs the I'm so stupid program. When you face a challenge, it automatically runs the I can't do this program. When you see an opportunity, it automatically runs the this won't work for me program. But you can reprogram your mental computer. You can install new software. You can create new automatic responses. Instead of I'm so stupid, you can program I made a mistake, but I'm learning. Instead of I can't do this, you can program I can figure this out. Instead of this won't work for me, you can program how can I make this work for me? The secret is repetition. You have to repeat your new positive statements over and over again until they become automatic. You have to practice your new internal dialogue until it becomes natural. You have to rehearse your new mental conversations until they become habit. This is where most people give up. They try the new positive self-talk for a few days and then they quit because it doesn't feel natural yet. But of course it doesn't feel natural. You've been practicing negative self-talk for years. It's going to take time to replace those old patterns with new ones. Think of it like learning a new language. When you first start learning Spanish or French, it feels awkward and unnatural. You have to think about every word. You have to concentrate on every sentence. But if you keep practicing, eventually it becomes automatic. Eventually you start thinking in the new language. The same thing happens with your internal dialogue. At first, positive self-talk will feel forced and artificial. But if you keep practicing, eventually it becomes natural. Eventually you start automatically thinking positive thoughts. Eventually the language of champions becomes your native tongue. Here's another powerful technique. Create a list of empowering statements that counteract your most common negative thoughts. Write them down and read them out loud every morning and every evening. This is called mental rehearsal, and it's one of the most effective ways to reprogram your subconscious mind. If you often think, I'm not good enough, write down and repeat, I am constantly growing and improving. If you often think, I don't have what it takes, write down and repeat, I have everything within me to succeed. If you often think, good things don't happen to people like me, write down and repeat, I attract wonderful opportunities into my life. But here's the important part. Don't just mindlessly repeat these statements like a robot. Feel them, believe them, visualize them being true in your life. Your subconscious mind responds to emotion and repetition. The more feeling you put behind your positive statements, the faster they'll become part of your automatic thinking. You also need to change the questions you ask yourself. Remember, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions. If you want better answers, you need to ask better questions. Instead of asking, why does this always happen to me, ask, what can I learn from this situation? Instead of asking, why am I so unlucky, ask, how can I create better luck for myself? Instead of asking, why don't I have what I want, ask, what do I need to do to get what I want? Better questions lead to better thinking. Better thinking leads to better decisions. Better decisions lead to better results. It's that simple. Another crucial element is surrounding yourself with positive input. You can't reprogram your mind with positive self-talk while constantly feeding it negative information from books, movies, music, and people. You have to be selective about what you allow into your mental environment. Start reading books that inspire you and teach you to think bigger. Listen to music that lifts your spirit instead of music that depresses it. Watch movies that motivate you instead of movies that discourage you. Spend time with people who believe in possibilities instead of people who focus on problems. Your environment is constantly programming your subconscious mind. If you want to change your internal dialogue, you have to change your external input. You have to feed your mind the kind of information that supports the mental conversations you want to have. Here's something else that's important. Be patient with yourself during this process. Changing lifelong patterns of thinking takes time. You're going to slip back into old negative thoughts sometimes. You're going to catch yourself using the old vocabulary of defeat. That's normal. That's part of the process. Don't beat yourself up when this happens. Don't say, I'll never change, or this isn't working. Just gently redirect your thoughts back to the positive. Just quietly replace the negative statement with a positive one. Just calmly return to practicing the language of champions. Remember, every time you catch yourself and correct your negative self-talk, you're building new neural pathways in your brain. You're literally rewiring your mind for success. You're creating new automatic responses that will serve you for the rest of your life. The compound effect applies to your thoughts just like it applies to everything else. Small changes in your daily self-talk, repeated consistently over time, will create massive changes in your life. Better thoughts lead to better actions. Better actions lead to better results. Better results lead to a better life. This is the discipline of mental hygiene. Just like you brush your teeth every day to maintain your physical health, you need to clean up your thoughts every day to maintain your mental health. You need to remove the negative and replace it with positive. You need to eliminate the limiting and substitute the empowering. Your internal dialogue is either your greatest asset or your greatest liability. It's either moving you toward your goals or away from them. It's either building you up or tearing you down. The choice is always yours. Choose to talk to yourself like a winner. Choose to use the vocabulary of victory. Choose to reprogram your mental conversations from limitation to liberation. Your future self will thank you for the work you do today on the conversation in your head. Now, let me tell you what happens when you truly master the art of talking to yourself like a winner. Let me paint you a picture of what your life looks like when the language of champions becomes your natural way of thinking. This is where the magic happens. This is where ordinary people become extraordinary. This is where dreams stop being dreams and start becoming reality. When you consistently use the vocabulary of victory in your internal dialogue, something remarkable begins to happen. Your new way of thinking becomes automatic. You don't have to force positive thoughts anymore. You don't have to consciously interrupt negative self-talk because there isn't any negative self-talk to interrupt. The language of champions becomes your native tongue. You wake up in the morning and your first thoughts are thoughts of possibility and potential. You look at your day ahead and instead of dreading it, you anticipate it. Instead of asking, what problems will I face today, you automatically ask, what opportunities will I create today? What can I accomplish? How can I grow? Who can I help? This isn't just positive thinking. This is powerful thinking. This is the kind of thinking that moves mountains, builds businesses, creates wealth, and changes lives. This is the thinking that separates the successful from the unsuccessful, the wealthy from the poor, the happy from the miserable. When you face challenges and your automatic response is, how can I solve this? Instead of, why is this happening to me? You become a different kind of person. You become a problem solver instead of a problem dweller. You become a solution finder instead of an excuse maker. You become a possibility creator instead of a limitation acceptor. People start to notice something different about you. They can't quite put their finger on what it is, but there's something about your energy, your confidence, your approach to life that's attractive. What they're sensing is the power of your internal dialogue affecting your external presence. You see, when you talk to yourself like a winner, you start to carry yourself like a winner. When you think thoughts of success and possibility, those thoughts show up in your posture, your voice, your actions, your decisions. People are drawn to that kind of energy. Opportunities are attracted to that kind of thinking. Your relationships begin to change too. When your internal dialogue is positive and empowering, you naturally attract people who think the same way. When you stop complaining to yourself about other people and start taking responsibility for the relationships in your life, you begin to attract higher quality people. You stop being a magnet for drama and negativity because you're no longer resonating with that frequency. You start attracting people who are growing, learning, achieving, contributing. Your circle of influence expands to include people who inspire you rather than drain you. In your career, things start to shift dramatically. When your internal dialogue changes from I have to go to work to I choose to go to work, everything about your work experience transforms. When you stop saying, I can't wait for Friday, and start saying, how can I add more value today, your career begins to accelerate. Your boss notices that you're different. Your colleagues see that you approach problems differently. Your customers feel that you serve them differently. When your internal conversation is about contribution and growth instead of survival and comfort, your professional life reflects that change. Financially, the transformation is even more dramatic. When you stop saying, I can't afford it, and start asking, how can I afford it? Your brain begins working on solutions instead of accepting limitations. When you stop thinking of money as scarce and start thinking of it as abundant, opportunities to earn more money begin to appear. You start to see business opportunities that you never noticed before. You begin to think of ways to solve problems for people. You start to ask yourself, what value can I create? What service can I provide? What problem can I solve? And when you ask better questions, you get better answers. Your health improves too. When you stop saying, I'm getting old, and start saying, I'm getting better, your body responds accordingly. When you stop focusing on what's wrong with your physical condition and start focusing on what's right, your energy increases. You start making better choices about what you eat, how much you exercise, how much you sleep, because your internal dialogue supports those choices. Instead of saying, I should exercise, you say, I choose to take care of my body. Instead of saying, I have to eat healthy, you say, I want to nourish myself well. But perhaps the most powerful change happens in how you handle setbacks and failures. When something doesn't go according to plan, your automatic response is no longer, I knew this wouldn't work, or I'm such a failure. Your automatic response becomes, what can I learn from this? How can I do better next time? What is this teaching me? This is the difference between people who let one failure destroy their dreams and people who use every failure as fuel for their next attempt. This is the difference between people who quit after the first rejection and people who see rejection as practice for the acceptance that's coming. When your internal dialogue is programmed for persistence rather than defeat, you become unstoppable. You don't quit when things get tough because tough times don't defeat you anymore. They develop you. You don't give up when you face obstacles because obstacles don't discourage you anymore. They challenge you to grow stronger. When you begin to realize that every successful person has faced the same kinds of challenges you're facing, the difference is how they talk to themselves about those challenges. The difference is the internal conversation they had when things got difficult. Your dreams start to feel achievable instead of impossible. When you consistently tell yourself, I can figure this out, instead of this is too hard for me, complex goals begin to break down into manageable steps. When you ask yourself, what's the next step? Instead of how will I ever accomplish this, your path forward becomes clear. You stop being intimidated by successful people and start being inspired by them. When you see someone who has achieved what you want to achieve, instead of thinking, I could never do that, you think, if they can do it, I can learn to do it too. You start studying success instead of envying it. The ripple effect of your transformed internal dialogue extends far beyond your own life. Your family notices the change in you. Your children hear you talking to yourself differently, and they begin to adopt the same positive internal dialogue. Your spouse sees you approaching life with more confidence and optimism. You become a positive influence on everyone around you, not through preaching or lecturing, but simply through the example of how you live. People want to know your secret. They want to understand what's different about you. They want to learn how you stay so positive and motivated. And here's what you tell them. You tell them that you learn to change the conversation in your head. You learn to talk to yourself like a winner instead of a loser. You learn to use the vocabulary of victory instead of the vocabulary of defeat. You learn that your internal dialogue creates your external reality. You become a teacher, an example of what's possible when someone commits to mastering their internal dialogue. You become proof that people can change, that circumstances don't determine destiny, that thinking really can transform lives. Years from now, when you look back on your life, you'll be able to point to the moment when everything changed. It wasn't when you got a new job or moved to a new city or met a certain person. It was when you decided to change the conversation in your head. It was when you chose to talk to yourself like a winner. That decision, that commitment to transform your internal dialogue becomes the foundation for everything good that follows in your life. Your success, your happiness, your relationships, your health, your wealth, your contribution to the world. It all traces back to that moment when you decided to master the most important conversation you'll ever have. The conversation with yourself. So here's my challenge to you. Starting right now, today, this very moment, commit to talking to yourself like a winner. Commit to using the vocabulary of victory. Commit to asking yourself better questions. Commit to expecting better outcomes. Commit to believing in better possibilities. Your future is not determined by your past. Your circumstances are not permanent. Your limitations are not real. The only thing standing between you and the life you want is the conversation in your head. Change that conversation and you change everything. Talk to yourself the way winners do, and you'll become a winner too. It's that simple, and it's that powerful. The choice is yours. The time is now. Your new life is waiting for you to speak it into existence. One thought at a time, one word at a time, one conversation at a time. The conversation in your head never stops. Make sure it's a conversation that builds the life you want instead of the life you don't want. Make sure it's a conversation worthy of the person you're becoming. Make sure it's the conversation of a winner.